Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. We're presented by Underdog. We're presented by FanDuel. I am Nick Whalen, joined as I am every Wednesday morning by our guy, Brandon Kravitz, down in Orlando. Brandon, a lot to get to today. We'll talk about some fallout from last night's 5-game slate. Obviously, touch on Joel Embiid. Give you an update on where his MVP odds stand. Let's say they've taken a tumble in the last 12 hours. And then we'll give you a preview of a big Wednesday night slate, talk some All-Star, and, of course, take live viewer questions over the second half of the pod. So get those questions in the chat. We will hit those over the final 20, 25 minutes or so of the podcast. Got to take care of some business first. Underdog Fantasy, #1 platform for NBA best ball and DFS player pick'em contest. If you have not tried Underdog yet, new users over at Underdog get a free first-time deposit bonus up to $100 and a free 6-month subscription to RotoWire with the promo code RWNBA. That's RWNBA. So if you deposit $100, you get $100 to play with on Underdog. Pretty good deal. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app today and use that promo code RWNBA to claim your free RotoWire subscription and that deposit bonus. FanDuel, tackle millions in prizes all playoffs long. In FanDuel fantasy contests, there's one playoff game remaining, and it's in like a week and a half. So hurry up on this one. If you're new to fantasy, there's no better time to get in on the action because right now, new customers get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Playing fantasy for huge cash prizes on FanDuel is fun and exciting. Just draft your lineup and watch your team move up the leaderboard. Plus, on FanDuel, you can choose from full slate contests with multiple games, single game contests, season-long best ball, beginner only. You can set up your own contest with just you and your friends. Basically, whatever you want to do, you can set it up over on FanDuel. And when you win, you will get paid instantly. So kick off football season with a 100% deposit match up to $100. FanDuel.com. Start playing today for huge cash prizes. All right. That was a lot of talking to begin the episode, Brandon. Let me ask you, how are you? What's going on in your life?
I am doing great. Coasting along. I feel like the month of January has lasted 3 full months. I can't tell you exactly why. I think it's just, you try and ramp yourself back up. It takes a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and then before you know it, the month is over. So this is where I'm at. That's my old man take of I think as you get older, you just feel like sometimes these months just drag along, and you'll see. You'll get there.
How old are you? I can't be that much younger than you.
I'm 38.
Okay, I'm 31. So, all right, yeah. I guess technically, if we're going, by that scale, you're technically an old man. There's probably people watching being like, no, not at all. I
that one's on YouTube, though.
You look like a young 38. I would have guessed like 34.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. But no, I feel good. The weather has been amazing here in Florida. So, I mean, the fact that I'm wearing a sweater, I get to rock these about, 4 times a year. So, always a good time.
Yeah, man. I escaped to Arizona last week. Actually,
that's right.
Right after
you had a big trip.
So, yeah, man, we played a lot of golf out there. Played 54 holes in 2 days, which was fantastic. Played like the worst 2 holes of my life to start, and I had like a mini panic. Like, did I just forget how to play golf? Like, it was like embarrassingly bad. Like, I pulling out my 7-iron, hitting the ball like 35 yards. So maybe that's what happens when you haven't swung in a month and a half. You get off a plane, the range is closed, and you just have to walk up to the first tee when you're paired with 2 strangers and just tee it up and see how it goes. But yeah, I'll tell you off air, Brandon, I will just say we were paired up with the wildest 2-man duo I have ever played with in my life.
Like in a fun way or in a, can I be with anybody else kind of a way?
In a fun way, I guess, for them. In a in a dangerous way in some ways for us, it was nuts. I mean, they were nice guys, but let's just say they were doing some things on the course that I would not ever partake in or advise. So that made for an interesting experience. But the next day was a lot more chill. We got paired up with like this 70-year-old guy who spent his whole life working as a land surveyor in Alaska. Could not have been more chill. Could not have been more of just a classic golf guy. Where do you stand on that? I know you're not as big of a golfer as me, but I am a staunch, I do not want to be paired up. Like, I I would never be that guy that's like, oh, you run into somebody and you're like, oh, just join our group. Like, no, I want to either be by myself or with my friends.
I am with you 100%. It is one of, and this is probably not a good reason to stay away from the course, especially in the state that I live in, where they are readily available and the weather is usually accommodating for it when it's not raining. But that's one of the things that keeps me away from the course. I don't have friends that I would routinely go golfing with. So, and I have no problem going by myself, but I live in fear of being paired up for a day with somebody that I don't know. And by the way, so the weather has been so great. I did go out to the driving range last week. I am not a golfer. I have a golf set. It was handed down to me. I have never purchased golf clubs in my life. And I thought, you know what? These are pretty crappy. I'm going to go into the clubhouse and see if I could get myself a driver. I'm going to get myself a new driver.
Yeah, you want to pay $800?
Yeah, I said, so how much is this one? And the guy goes $599. And I'm like, there's no way saying $5.99. So I was like, I meant for just that club. I'm not talking about the whole bag. And he said, yeah, I don't know how you golfers do it. That is insane.
I know. I don't want to spend too much time on golf. I will say I'm not like a big equipment guy. I'm not a, upgrade the driver every year. It's a, on a need basis. I would love to, someday be in that position where I can, drop 10K on clubs every couple of years. But
let me ask you something before we get to the very important basketball news. As somebody who has purchased clubs, I think you probably do well for yourself, but you're not a millionaire, You
don't know that.
That is true. I technically have no idea what you've got in your bank account, but when you first went to go make that purchase, were you just like, forget it? I know that this is going to cost a lot. I'm going to deal with what I have to incur here and then live with it. Or did you like go the back channel, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace route? How did you make that? Because that would be really hard to make that jump.
Yeah, I am a bargain hunter, so I definitely did not pay full price, but I didn't want like, I bought a new driver last winter. So you get the end of season sale, you buy a model year behind, basically right after the new models come out, they'll drop the previous models by like $200. So I think I paid $300, maybe $350 for a 1 year previous model driver, a Ping. And it was worth it to me. I mean, I play enough golf that it was worth it. I've had my irons for a long time, like, 7-8 years at this point. So, I have trouble spending a lot of money on basically anything, but golf is where I will make an exception to that rule. All right, let's talk some Joel Embiid here. We got a good question in the chat, and this pertains to what we wanted to talk about. Obviously, if you were watching in the late window last night, you saw Joel Embiid writhing in pain, shouting out in pain as Jonathan Kuminga kind of jumped for a loose ball. There were actually a couple of these. Draymond got tangled up with Embiid earlier in the game, kind of dove at his knee. I don't think that was malicious. I know there were some tweets going around of like, oh, Draymond wasn't going for the ball. I actually think he was. Embiid just kind of tipped it away at the last second. So I obviously Draymond doesn't really get the benefit of the doubt, but in that situation, I don't think he was in the wrong. But Kuminga, kind of landed on Embiid's knee, just one of those freak plays where to me it looked like, Embiid's knee kind of got smashed into the floor. He's going to get an MRI today. We will see. It certainly, to me, it didn't look that bad in person, but you never know. Either way, Joel Embiid is very much in danger of dropping out of the MVP race. And, our guy Matt brings up an interesting question here. Is the 65-game minimum rule for NBA awards helping or hurting us in fantasy? I feel like it's forcing players to play hurt and play fewer minutes. I think everybody had that thought last night, right? Where Embiid ends up playing. It almost feels like he was pressured into it, right? Like all the tweets around the NBA world yesterday are like, man, if he misses this game, he's only got 4 left before he's ineligible. I don't know how much that factored in for Embiid. Obviously he's missed time already this season. He missed a couple games before this. He won MVP last year. I don't know if it's as important to him this year as it was a year ago, but this is an interesting kind of rub to this NBA rule, which I was in favor of, right? I think, the resting and whatnot had gotten so out of hand the last couple of years that it felt like the NBA had to do something. And, one of the unintended consequences now is like, if you're a borderline player like Embiid, who has the numbers to be the MVP, are you now pushing to stay in contention when maybe you shouldn't be out there? What say you?
Yeah, I say good. I mean, I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but what you just explained of a guy feeling pressure to go out and play, good. That is what you're supposed to feel when you're a professional athlete. You're paid handsomely to do it. There are fans that are dying to see you in attendance, and your teammates need you. In every other sport, we applaud that. In the NBA, we've gotten to the point where we go, man, it's like caution over everything. And I'm so tired of it. I see it all the time. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we are in a season where the clear-cut MVP is Joel Embiid, and yet he probably won't end up eligible for it. That stinks. Maybe they can go back and change the requirement. Maybe 65 is too much, and disqualifies people that would still be worthy. But overall, the pressure that it puts on players, I think, is a good thing, and the league is winning in that regard, even if a player did get hurt.
I tend to agree with that. And, it's not like Joel Embiid came out in the first quarter and, is hobbling around and his knee's clearly an issue. Like he obviously limped off after the Kuminga play, but that was, that I don't think that had anything to do with the previous knee injury. He just happened to get his knee kind of landed on, right? Like I don't know if we can draw a through line on that one necessarily, but it certainly felt like Embiid, he's aware, he's on social media, he's aware of what people are saying about this. I don't know that we necessarily need this hard disqualification. Like you cannot win MVP if you play 63 games. Like I wonder like how many people are going to vote for Embiid if he puts, let's say he finishes at 58 games played with these numbers and the 65 game rule is not in place. Like I do think in general, if you miss that many games, you're probably just not going to get votes anyway. Like obviously Embiid, you almost won Rookie of the Year playing like 29 games his first year. But that was a unique situation. I think he was going up against Malcolm Brogdon and Michael Carter-Williams or something. I think with how competitive MVP is right now, like if you have if Giannis, Luka, SGA, Jokic, if those guys are all playing around 70 games and Embiid plays 54 games, I think it's going to kind of work itself out anyway. So we'll see. The NBA has always been flexible with this stuff. I don't think this is just something that's set in stone now forever. But speaking of Embiid's odds, a week ago, plus 120 to win MVP. After last night, he's now 15-1. I wouldn't bet it. I would not bet it. Like the chances of him missing 5 more games the rest of the way, could happen in the next 2 weeks.
Right. And yeah, I mean, there's no way you can bet Joel Embiid right now. There's too much time left in the season. You got the injury, still set to get an MRI. He could be disqualified with just this diagnosis. Never mind whatever is to come in the future. At the end of the year, if their seating is set or they're comfortable where they're at, they could bench him and get ready for the postseason. He has 6 games left to miss? I believe that's the number. He can only miss 6 more.
5
games.
or 6 because he obviously played last night.
That's just not that many. We're not even at the All-Star break yet.
Right.
But this is the reason why the NBA wanted to set a specific number. You're right. If you missed a certain number of games, voters are going to use that against you. But I think that the NBA is trying to say, let's not put the pressure on the voters here. Let's get the players back out there because I think we would all agree the number one issue the NBA has over the last couple of years is load management. And they're just trying to come up with different ways where they can mitigate that. And they came up with this rule, and they came up with you can't bench 2 All-Stars in a nationally televised game, which is so goofy.
I know.
I mean, never mind the fact that the other day we had the Nuggets and the 76ers go back to Embiid. Embiid was announced inactive 15 minutes before tip-off, as was Tyrese Maxey, who isn't an All-Star yet. So technically the 76ers didn't break the nationally televised rule, but come on, they did. It's just that technically, by the letter of the law, they didn't. I think the NBA, not to get too far off track, but they need to adopt more of an NFL rule where for a fact, 90 minutes before kickoff, who is available and who is not. None of this, he went around, he did shoot around 5 minutes before tip-off, and we decided that he's not good to go. In a freak accident, okay, but you got to get away from that. It's just, it's tough. It's tough for people in our world, and you can't shy away from it. If you're going to show us gambling ads during your product, then you kind of have to cater to that audience. Fantasy and sports bettors are kind of left out in the lurch when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, you're right. And, of course, if Kevin Durant slips on the floor 5 minutes before the game starts and twists his knee, like in that situation, of course, he's not going to play. But no, I would not be surprised if, a few days from now we get the, some sort of nominal fine for the Sixers for the way they handled the Embiid situation. At least Maxey was on the injury report. I think the big issue is that Embiid was cleared from the report. Nick Nurse said pregame, yeah, I think he's going to play. I have no reason not to believe that. Like, I don't even think Nick Nurse was complicit in this. I think he actually thought Embiid was going to play. And then, like you said, 15 minutes before tip-off, he ends up being scratched. So, you at least got to put him on the report. You got to put the possibility out there that he could not play. For sure. We will see. Again, MRI coming for Joel Embiid today. If we get any news, in the next half hour or so, we'll, of course, pass that along.
By the way, if I can break in before we move on, I found an interesting stat. I was curious, just did a quick Google search on this. The least amount of games played by a player to win NBA MVP. You'd actually have to go back to a time where we didn't think this was an issue at all. 1998, or maybe that was a strike year. Maybe that was the reason. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. 49 games played by Karl Malone. Okay, scratch that. Yeah. Of recent memory, you've had 2 players that have not hit the 65-game threshold that have won MVP, Giannis in 2019 and LeBron James in 2011. Everybody else has played at least 65 games.
Yeah, well, and 2011 was also a strike year, right, where the season started late, and I think it was a 66-game season.
Oh,
right?
There you go. Yeah.
So,
you're right.
Yeah,
so Giannis is – so really it's one and Embiid won last year. He met the threshold. If that rule was in existence, he played 66 games last year. So maybe this is important information to know when you start to form your own opinion of what the NBA should do. 65 looks like a pretty good number because we just don't have a lot of examples of guys winning the MVP outside of strike seasons. Apparently, that play less than that.
Even the Giannis example, I think that was the COVID shortened season when they played 72 games, right? So I mean, there's really no precedent for it in an actual 82 game season.
Oh, geez, you're right.
Right, yeah. So there's
recall,
really
by the way.
Well, look, I follow the NBA. Let's just say that. Good point here too. Before we move on, by Matt, that Tyrese Haliburton could lose $40 million in bonus money, which I agree with Matt. I mean, we saw it last night. I mean, this was kind of a crazy move. Pacers were down big to Boston. They rally back in the third quarter. It was like a 3-point game. And then we get an announcement with a minute left in the third quarter that Haliburton is on a minutes limit and will not play the rest of the game. Pacers ended up keeping it close. You do wonder, of course, do they win that game if Haliburton plays? And it sounds like that's going to continue for at least a few more games. And you got to, in order for Haliburton to get that $40 million bonus, he needs to make All-NBA. And you can't make All-NBA if you don't play at least 65 games. And you also, the other caveat here is you have to play at least 20 minutes per game in those 65. So there's kind of like a minutes threshold that's tied into this as well. Anyway, enough load management talk. I want to talk about the Knicks real quickly. They're down 2 starters. They're down Julius Randle. I would think at least through the All-Star break. I think it's actually, as far as good timing to dislocate your shoulder, when you got an 8-day break built into this timetable, kind of a good time for it to happen. You would hope he'll be back in late February. They've been without OG Anunoby for these last 2 nights as well. Played a back-to-back on Monday and Tuesday. Came away with 2 wins over Charlotte and Utah. We saw them, start Precious Achiuwa next to Isaiah Hartenstein. Josh Hart moved into the starting lineup. Dante DiVincenzo has been on fire these last 2 games, 28 against Charlotte, and then 9 3-pointers last night in that win over Utah. And as we expected, Jalen Brunson has obviously been the heart and soul of this team all season, but without Julius Randle stepping up to an even larger degree. And, Achiuwa is somebody I was telling Alex on Monday, I paid up for him in Stake League. I think I put $5 or $6 in out of $100 budget, which is dwindling for me as this year goes along. I'm really hoping that pays off. If I can get a month of Precious Achiuwa, giving me 12 points and 8 rebounds and a couple blocks per game, I think that's going to be super valuable. And played 40 minutes last night.
Yeah, Tom Thibodeau bigs are always going to be a factor. Just the way that they play, that kind of clang and bang style. And Precious Achiuwa is a big physical body that can take advantage of situations like this. Surprised the rebounding totals haven't been higher, but you love what you're seeing in terms of the scoring department. And I don't blame you, helping to keep a red-hot Knicks team afloat. It's amazing. Sometimes you get these teams that they just catch fire, and it almost doesn't matter who is in and out of the lineup. They just have it rolling right now in New York, and they're solidifying their spot. They're playing so well. They're probably going to end up a top 4 team in the East at the end of the day.
Yeah, they have not missed a beat, man. And I think when you lose someone like Randle, you're not a better team, but I think they could be a better defensive team without him. And I think the benefit to losing a player for like a month as opposed to a season-ending injury is you get more reps for some of these guys who you're going to need later in the season, right? It's like I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. It's like, all right, Precious Achiuwa, this is your time. You're playing 35 minutes a night for the next month. Josh Hart, you're doing the same. He played 43 last night. I mean, that part of that is just Tibbs being Tibbs, but you're getting guys a little bit more seasoning. Obviously they've had to hand some more minutes to Jericho Sims. Miles McBride has been in the mix. Quentin Grimes playing more minutes as well. And I think that could pay dividends later in the year, when push really comes to shove. Let's talk a little all-star here, Brandon. And we had the starters announced this past week, Thursday. Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, Haliburton, Lillard in the East. No major surprises there, although I thought it would be Brunson over Lillard. I thought narrative-wise, it's really felt like Brunson's had the better season. I thought he was more deserving, to be honest. But, it's Damian Lillard. You can't really quibble too much about that. In the West, LeBron, KD, Jokic, Doncic, SGA. Again, no surprises there, although I listen to a ton of pods and read a bunch of stuff as you do. I was surprised how many people are like, yeah, I think LeBron might not even make the game. It's like if he had not been voted in, which, he was the leading vote getter for it feels like the 20th year in a row. I think there were people that were prepared to leave him off given where the Lakers sit in the standings. But we knew in the West specifically, the battle for the starting spots would be insane. Obviously Kawhi Leonard, super deserving. I think he's a shoe-in, to make it as a reserve, but it's going to be really, really interesting to see where those spots end up going. I mean, we're going to have like 6, 7, 8 guys in the West who I would say in a quote unquote normal year, or maybe a more diluted NBA would be shoo-ins for this.
Yeah, the snubs list articles are going to get a lot of clicks this year because
they're
going to have some good ones, I think, in both conferences, but certainly in the West. The NBA media nerds, and I'll put us in that group too, have to remember what the All-Star game is all about. LeBron James, as long as he is playing well, will be an All-Star until the day he retires, as he should be. He is what the All-Star game is all about. And that's why I'm not going to quibble too much about him being a starter. But if you wanted to get technical with it, then his teammate should be the starting front court player that represents the Lakers, not him. Anthony Davis has played more games. He's got better averages. He's a better defender. So Davis, to me, would be the starter. But it's LeBron James, so I think we should all quickly get over that. What happens with some of these bench guys and for the similar reasons, even though it's year one of his career, can you find a way to wedge Victor Wembanyama into the All-Star game? There are probably not enough spots, but I mean, his numbers are ridiculous and his popularity is off the charts. So when you start to combine those things, statistically, it's not crazy. And in terms of the notoriety that it would bring to the game, which is what it is all about at the end of the day. I wonder if he becomes part of that conversation.
He's in the conversation, no question. I just think it's too competitive this year for somebody on literally the worst team in the Western Conference to get in. I mean, he has the numbers. He's been as advertised. I think in some ways he's been better than advertised. If there was ever a rookie who was going to do it, and in general, like even the best rookies have a really tough time making the All-Star games. Like, LeBron had as much hype as anybody coming in. He didn't make the All-Star game his rookie year. I don't think it's happening. I don't think you can justify it on a 10-37 team, which is not Wembanyama's fault by any means. I think he would have had to be voted in, and he was 8th in the fan vote in the Western Conference. And look, it's LeBron, Jokic, and KD. It's like those guys are going to outvote him no matter what. But I think it's too competitive. You look right now, it's like Minnesota, they have 3 deserving All-Stars. I think they might only get 1. I think Edwards makes it. I don't know. I mean, Gobert will get some votes. He could be maybe the last guy in. I don't really think Towns has a ton of support right now. Jamal Murray is deserving in Denver. I don't think he gets in either. OKC, there's been some Jalen Williams All-Star buzz. Obviously Chet Holmgren is in the mix as well. I don't think either of those guys make it. I think Kawhi and Paul George are deserving. Kawhi for sure. And, I think Paul George has actually been super underrated so far this season. I think both of those guys get in. I think you have to choose one of the Kings guys. It's probably Sabonis for me.
Yeah,
I hope both of them make it. I think they're both deserving. But then you get into, Devin Booker kind of feels like he's going to get a spot. Anthony Davis is going to be a reserve. Markkanen, Şengün. And then the really interesting one to me is Stephen Curry. I will be shocked if Stephen Curry is not selected as a reserve. But this is the shakiest case he's had in his entire career, dating all the way back to like 2012.
Yeah, but it's still Steph Curry, and
Right.
he is helping. He is the only reason why that Golden State Warriors team is still afloat. Look at what he was able to do last night, knock down 8 threes. It's not like this guy's going anywhere. So I think Curry is a lock to be an all-star. Anthony Edwards, I'd put him in that conversation as well. Yeah. Do you get both Clippers guys in? Because then that opens up a spot. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, probably both all-stars. Devin Booker would be a lock, and Anthony Davis. And so you really only have about 2 spots to quibble about when it comes to all those other names that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so my locks would be Davis, Kawhi, George, Curry, and Edwards. And that's more, when I say lock, that's like what I think will happen, not necessarily who I would pick, although I would have those guys. So you're right. It's really 2 spots for, we haven't even talked about James Harden, who I think is absolutely deserving. And, the Clippers surging to 30-15 and, knocking on the door of the 3 seed in the West, I think helps his case. Again, I don't think the Clippers get 3, but wouldn't surprise me. Again, Harden deserving. So you got 2 spots for, Harden, Kyrie, Fox, Sabonis, Booker, Murray, Şengün. If you want to throw Wembanyama in there, you can. Towns, Gobert. I don't think Jaren Jackson really has a case. Obviously, nobody in Portland has a case. New Orleans is an interesting one because they're sitting in 8th right now. They're 5 games over 500. I don't think anybody's had a good enough individual season. Zion's been good, Ingram's been good, McCollum's been good, Valanciunas has been good. I don't know if any of those guys have the statistical case.
Right. Yeah, and the NBA would love to get Zion in the All-Star game, but there's just way too much competition for that. It is tough because do you look at this through the lens of it's just simply the most deserving and that's it? That's the period, end of sentence. Or is it most deserving with the most fan appeal? This is still an all-star game. This is not an all-NBA list. And that's where I go back to somebody like Wembanyama. If you're trying to tell the story of the first half of the season and do it with the biggest stars that have played well enough to where it's not a joke if you let them in, like it would have been if Jeremy Lin was an all-star back when he went off with the Knicks.
Right.
That's where I'd have a hard time leaving Wembanyama off if I were among the folks that vote for this. But Sabonis, I think Sabonis should be in, both of the Clippers guys. So it really comes down to that Gobert spot. There's really one spot for me where I have no idea what they're going to do. And it would be between Rudy Gobert, Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama, Lauri Markkanen. That would kind of be my group.
I don't think Markkanen quite has the case. As fun as the Jazz have been for the last month, if
he's
that's
had a
really
rough few games as of late too.
Yeah, I would rather see Fox and Sabonis in. I think those guys are deserving. I don't think he could really knock the team record. The stats have been incredible. It really feels like both of those guys are having all-star caliber seasons. So that's where I would lean. The East, to me, I'd like to say it's a little more straightforward, but I still think those last 2 spots are also going to be interesting. I think Jaylen Brown's in. Jalen Brunson absolutely has to be in. Then you're at 7. Donovan Mitchell, 8. Maxey, 9. That is where I draw the line as far as guys that have to be in. After that, did the Heat get somebody? Is it Adebayo? Is it Butler? Both guys have kind of missed time. I would probably lean Adebayo. It feels like Miami gets 1. Paolo Banchero, I think he's got a chance here. I think if we had taken the vote like a month ago, he would be a lock. But I think he's got a pretty good chance. DeMar DeRozan's in the mix. Tre Young, I have no idea. He finished pretty high in the initial voting. He was 4th among East guards. Number two in the fan rank, number 6 in the player and the media rank. So that's ultimately what did him in. But Tre Young's still very popular, despite being a little more polarizing in NBA circles. And then you got Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam as a couple of guys who could sneak in as well.
Yeah, I think Paolo gets in as somebody that is like it's easier to slide him in without debate with that Julius Randle injury. When I was looking
Yep.
at this, we've talked about this a lot on my sports show in Orlando. Um, how does Paolo get in? Because there is that clog with the 7 bench spots. Julius Randle getting hurt, I think, opens that door wide open. And
Yep.
and then yeah, you have that debate about the Heat guys. Jimmy Butler's the bigger star. I still think that matters. So I'll use the same argument. Jimmy Butler is one of the it guys in the NBA. He's had a good enough year to this point to be an all-star without making a mockery of it. So you put him in. Tyrese Maxey has been amazing this season. So if he's healthy, you go ahead and throw him in there as well. Trey Young, Trey Young got the fan vote. That has to matter. That stuff has to matter. But I mean, I think DeJounte Murray has been a better player this year. But that stuff, when you're into coin flip mode, the fan vote, I think, should matter a lot. And if fans want to see Trey Young, then Trey Young should be in the All-Star game.
Power to the
Look,
fans,
name the
I
people,
suppose.
Nick. I don't know what to tell you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the team success thing is going to be as big of an issue in the East because I think it's pretty obvious like who's going to make it from the good teams. And like you said, Randle could get in and then, that spot rolls over and becomes a replacement. So it's, kind of a wash as far as somebody like Banchero, whether he's actually technically in or just is the replacement for Randle. But it's like Indiana's not getting more than one. I don't think the Sixers have a case for anybody besides Embiid and Maxi. Jared Allen is in that discussion. You could say maybe Brook Lopez for the Bucks. I don't really think either of those guys get in. I think Allen probably would get in over Lopez. And obviously Miami doesn't necessarily feel deserving of 2. And Orlando, love Franz Wagner. Don't think he's quite going to be an all-star this season. All right, let's answer a few questions here. Keep those coming in the chat, guys. We will continue to hit these as we finish up the pod. Mal says trade KD ? We've gotten a lot of should I trade Durant? Should I trade Davis? Should I trade LeBron? Even Steph Curry has come up in that discussion. Some of these veterans who've been injured in recent years. For the most part, across the league, I think this has been like a best case scenario health season for a lot of guys who've been shaky in recent years. Like Kawhi, Paul George, they played as many games as possible. I think LeBron's only missed like 4 or 5 games on the year. Last night was only Anthony Davis's 3rd missed game of the entire season. KD's only missed 7. He hasn't had one long absence. It's been 2 games here, 2 games here, 3 games there. And he hasn't missed a game, since January 5th. I would probably continue to try to ride this out with KD. I mean, if you're trading him like any elite player, you got to be getting a pretty big package back, right? Like you're either trading him straight up for another top 10 guy, or you're packaging, 2 borderline elite players and you're sending out Kevin Durant. I would just say, if you're putting him out there, if you're a Kevin Durant owner and you're initiating that trade, aim high. Do not start with like, I think they'll accept this. Like, go a level up, make somebody say no.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do think Kevin Durant is saving himself a little bit for the playoffs. When you get to where he is in his NBA career, you know what the regular season is. It's just one giant tune-up, and this team is good enough to win the championship with the talent they have. So I see a Kevin Durant that he's playing, and he's actually played more games than the other 2 in the big 3. He's played more games than Devin Booker. He's definitely played more games than Bradley Beal. But when they're all out there, I think he's comfortable taking a backseat role, and that can impact things in the fantasy department. But, you don't need to go selling that to the person that you're trying to trade with. So Nick is right. He's still Kevin Durant. You gotta have somebody that's willing to pay the premium for him.
Our guy Aditya over in Indonesia, he said, what up, Nick and Brandon? Shout out from Indonesia. Appreciate the global reach of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. First of all, he said his golf set was handed down from his dad. No way he's paying for a new set. He's just a casual, on occasion golfer only. Yeah, golf is crazy expensive, dude. You want a nice full set? We're talking like $5,000. So I'm with you on that. That's $5,000.
I had no idea. 38 years old. This is the year that I learned it costs that much to own a new set of clubs.
We're talking, well, you could get a nice set for cheaper than that. But if you want the new Titleist set, yeah, it's going to cost you.
Crazy.
Aditya also asks, on the basketball side of things, is Paul Reed now a must grab? I would obviously like to wait for news on Embiid. If this ends up being nothing and he's back in the lineup later this week, their next game is tomorrow at Utah. Then they play Saturday against Brooklyn. They do have a 4-game week coming up the following week. But yeah, especially if you're in a somewhat deeper league, 12 team or above, probably. Paul Reed, historically, it's like unless Joel Embiid's out, he can pretty much be ignored. He almost never plays enough minutes when Embiid's out there for him to matter. But when Embiid's out, we've seen, he had that big game against Denver over the weekend, 30 and 13 with 2 steals. That was really the game of his life, probably the best game he's ever played.
Yeah.
The numbers haven't been like fantastic in the other games that Embiid's missed. Like even factoring in that 30 and 13 game, in 10 games that Paul Reed has started this season, he's averaging 12.5 points, 6.7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.3 blocks. Very good. Definitely good enough that you want him out there, but it's not like he's just a guaranteed 20 and 13 without Embiid every single night. So if you're thinking Joel Embiid's going to miss time, and of course we don't know quite yet, I would say, yeah, I think in most leagues he's going to be scooped up. So if you don't grab him, somebody else will.
Yeah, he's definitely worth being grabbed, but keep your expectations in check. If you're just going, and I know that was a nationally televised game, maybe we all paid a little bit more attention to that one collectively against Denver, that highlight spot on ESPN, but that is not who Paul Reed is. 21 shot attempts in that game. The highest total he had reached in any other game this season was 12. So there's just a volume factor that's not typically there. I don't know what got into those guys in Denver. They almost won that game, but just keep your expectations in check. But yeah, if Embiid is going to miss real time, I think you have to consider him a pickup.
Pedro says the Randle status is weeks, not months, but should we expect at least 4 weeks? I would say yes. We're not injury experts per se, but we've seen a lot of injuries over the years. That's kind of how I came up at RotoWire, is just, monitoring the news wire. You kind of get a sense for this stuff. It's never a one-to-one comparison as far as, all right, dislocated shoulder, that equals X amount of time. But yeah, I think 4 weeks sounds about right. And that's factoring in the All-Star break. Keep that in mind. So, this week would be 1 week. Next week would be 2 weeks. 3 weeks would be the week before the All-Star break when the Knicks only have 2 games. And then that 4th week would be coming out of the All-Star break when they also have 2 games. Teams resume play on that Thursday, the 22nd. So I think best case, he's back on the 22nd at Philly. Worst case, maybe it's like he's back for that 5th week at the end of February. But I don't think we're talking months here for Randle. I think teams, sometimes they could be a little optimistic when they hand down a timetable. But I think, if this was going to be a 2 to 3 month thing, I think they would have told us. So I'm going to base my opinion off that information. And my guess is that he's back, before the end of February. So either that, 22nd, 24th, 26th, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And good news is a dislocated shoulder is one of those injuries that once it's healed, it's healed. Right. It's not one of those things where you need a big ramp up period, like some of those soft tissue injuries. So I would say a month. Definitely prepare yourself for a month. That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that's about what I would expect as well. All right, good question here from Abe. He's talking about a points league, and he asked, quick question: LeBron James for Jamal Murray and Cade Cunningham. Who wins that deal? So anytime we get a points league question on Mondays, Alex likes to point out, just do the math, right? Points leagues, it can be a little bit more simple. All leagues are different as far as, what point values you assign for each stat category. But in category leagues, you're worried about percentages and stuff like that. In points leagues, it's just kind of add up the fantasy points. So far this season, LeBron James, this is going off of the official NBA.com scoring. He's at about 48 fantasy points per game in points leagues. Cade Cunningham at about 38. Jamal Murray is at about 38 as well, almost exactly the same production as Cade. So in that scoring format, that would tell you that Murray plus Cade is more valuable than LeBron.
I'm skeptical though,
Okay.
because we've seen enough evidence now over the years that LeBron is good for it. Jamal Murray is great in his role, but this is very much Nikola Jokic's team, and Murray's stats can kind of rise and fall with what the team needs from him. And Cade Cunningham plays on a Pistons team that we can't trust at all moving forward with how they're going to manage their business. So I'm a little bit nervous about what you're taking on when you have LeBron, who, based on the ranking I'm looking at, total points, he's 8th in the league in terms of fantasy points scored this year. I'm just not trying to trade that away right now. I know he's going to have his days where he doesn't play, but it's LeBron James, and if he's healthy, he's playing.
All right, we'll disagree on that one. I would take that trade. I think in a points league, I would do it. In a category league, I would think a little bit more deeply. SMK13 says, hello from Australia. What do you guys think about Maxey for Jalen Johnson? Yeah, I know Maxey's cooled off a little bit. Obviously, he's injured right now. Jalen Johnson looks great. I would still rather have Maxey. I think he's got a little more upside going forward. We'll see if the Hawks make a change at the deadline. There's a world in which Jalen Johnson, kind of becomes the number 2, and maybe that's a little bit closer the rest of the way. But I would still prefer Maxey.
Yeah, definitely want to keep Maxey on my squad and more of an offensive load that'll be on his shoulders if Joel Embiid ends up having to miss some extra time. So he is, like we just talked about, a bona fide all-star this year. Legitimately love Jalen Johnson and what he's been able to do this season, but Tyrese Maxey's the guy.
Should I drop Kuminga to take Ben Simmons off my IR today? 10-team head-to-head Yahoo Points League. Matt is currently in first. Nice. Props to you, Matt. And I'm in a close matchup with the second-place team. I was streaming that spot before I picked up Kuminga. So it's basically, who would you rather have, Kuminga or Ben Simmons? And, obviously in deeper leagues, both of these guys, very rosterable. Simmons, if he plays like he did the other night, even startable. I mean, Kuminga's been really good lately, and he was good again last night against Philly, 26-7-2 with 3 steals and a block. So I personally would stick with Kuminga. That is just me. I don't really trust Ben Simmons at all to stay healthy. Again, he looked great on Monday, looked way better than I expected, especially after the long layoff. If he miraculously stays healthy, he's probably the better option in a points league, but I'm not really punting on Kuminga right now, man. Last 7 games, 25 points, 7 rebounds, 1.3 steals, about a half a block, 61% from the field, starting to shoot it much better from 3 as well. So this is a tough question, but I would stick with Kuminga.
Yeah, hard to look away from Kuminga right now and what he's doing. Part of that starting lineup for a Golden State team that's trying to find life anywhere, and it seems like they've found it in a guy that they invested a heavy draft pick in just a couple of years ago. No chance I'm moving off of him. Like you said, Ben Simmons, maybe the least trustworthy player in the entire NBA. What exactly are you chasing that Kuminga isn't giving you from Ben Simmons? That's what I mean. A few more rebounds, maybe.
Well, I mean, Simmons, again, if he plays like he did in a 1-game sample on Monday, he's a nightly triple-double guy, right? I mean, what did he have? Like just like 11, 12, and 8 or something like that. I mean, it's a debate. It just matters how much you trust Ben Simmons. In my opinion, is that I do not trust him. David says, is Wiggins finally back to his old self and good to pick up? I mean, he is having his best week and a half of the season by a mile. Put up 23 last night. That was his best scoring output since mid-December. Last 5 games, 18 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal, and a block. I'd like to see a little more before we just say that he's like back. But, there were rumblings early in the season that he showed up out of shape. Maybe he had to kind of play himself into that condition. I would say in like anything bigger than a 12-team league, you could definitely pick him up. And even in a 12-teamer, he probably should be rostered at this point. His roster rate is up to 66% on Yahoo.
Yeah, it feels like a rosterable player, but the sample of him being really good again is very small. So I would be willing to cut ties if he dips back to the 7-4-1 guy that he was not too long ago.
All right, we'll hit a few more of these. Got like 2 or 3 more minutes. We'll go rapid fire here. Crowd Silencer says, would you trade Giddey for Tre Jones? 10-team points league. Said he just can't be patient with Giddey anymore. I think so. Yeah, I mean, if the Spurs, they're finally kind of doing the right thing and having a real point guard out there, it's changed the calculus. They've been more competitive. Wembanyama's looked great ever since Tre Jones entered the starting lineup. I think I would go with Tre Jones. I think he's given you about the production you'd expect since he's been starting. He's playing almost exactly 30 minutes a game. You could argue that Giddey maybe has a little more upside, but we just haven't really seen that this year.
Yeah, and maybe Giddey gets more run if Jalen Williams is out for an extended period of time, but I also don't know what the timeline is on that. I'm with you. I like the shakeup that Pop has gone with this Spurs team, and the assists are going to be there. That's what he specializes in, and he's certainly got a big target there down low.
Will Clarkson or Sexton be traded at the deadline? Is it good to stash Keyonte George prior to the deadline? Asks Albert. I think it's more likely that Clarkson ends up being dealt. I think he's the guy they'd rather part with. Sexton's played well for really most of the season, but especially the last month or so. I think both guys have appeal, right? And it just totally depends what Utah wants to do. They're sitting in 10th right now, and that's going to be a dogfight for really those like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 spots going down to the Warriors at 12. So if Utah, I wouldn't be surprised if they just stand pat and kind of run with this unit. It's not like you're going to get a ton for Clarkson anyway. But I think it's more likely of the two that Clarkson is dealt.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Jordan Clarkson's contract situation. This is a guy that would become an unrestricted free agent after next year. Of course, that helps in the trade department and could also help the overall value that you get back if you're the Utah Jazz. Colin Sexton has played himself into a role where I think he's part of what they would like to build their team around. That's how well he's been playing. But Clarkson does feel like the odd man out. And yeah, I guess that makes the second part of the question thumbs up in terms of stashing Keyonte George, because he would certainly be more of a factor.
Yeah, 2 more years left on Clarkson's deal, but it's 2 for $28, which is like a pretty big bargain at this point with where NBA salaries are going. So I don't really see that as an albatross by any means. All right, a couple more and then we're out of here. Scarlett says Fox and Lively or Maxi. So would you trade Fox and Lively for Tyrese Maxey in a 9-category league?
Struggle with that one. I think I would keep Fox and Lively.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, Fox and Maxey are like almost a dead even matchup if you're just looking at fantasy value so far this season. And, Lively ranks a little bit lower than you'd expect. The free throw percentage kind of drags him down, even though it doesn't take that many. He wasn't blocking a ton of shots early on. But, yeah, I think it's close enough between Fox and Maxey. Like, I think I maybe would rather have Maxey. But if you're saying that I have to give up Lively to get him, then I would just hold those two.
Right, and I would think, without looking at it, that Derek Lively doesn't take a lot of shots that are far away from the rim, so he's not hurting you in terms of field goal percentage.
Yeah, Lively, by the way, out tonight. No Kyrie, no Luka, and no Lively for the Mavs as they take on the Timberwolves. All right, 2 more. Scarlett also says Trey Murphy, is he a hold in 9-category leagues? The answer to me is how deep is your league? 14 and above, maybe not. Or maybe then I would say yes. Sorry, 14 and below, or 12 and below, maybe not. It's been a little disappointing. The Pels just kind of have too many guys in some ways. And, he's still playing a decent amount of minutes, but, the usage hasn't really been there. He's kind of 3-point dependent. He took 10 threes against Boston on Monday. So it's like, it's just a matter of, is he going 2 for 10, or is he going, 4 for 10 or 5 for 9, which is in the realm of possibility on any given night. The shooting has been cold lately. He's under 30% in his last 10 games, but I do think in general, and Scarlett says this is a 16-team league, I would hold him there. He's going to be picked up if you drop him.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that does not get to the free throw line. An amazing outlier over the last month. He had a game against the Dallas Mavericks about 15 days ago where he shot 12 free throws. But not a guy that gets to the line, and when he doesn't shoot it at a high clip. So that, that would hurt you. And yeah, just not what he was last year. I think they needed him to step up and play a bigger role. And that's just not what is called upon this year, because they've been fairly healthy.
All right, here's a good one to end on from Pedro. Can you tell me your top 3 stash players based on guys you feel are going to be traded? So he gives us an example. He said he's holding Onyeka Okongwu, of course, hoping that Clint Capel could be dealt. Capel's going to be really interesting. I think he should be traded. I think it would make a ton of sense. It's like, what team would be interested? It's like, who needs a big man, right? Like, would Golden State entertain that? Obviously they've kind of been needy at center. You look around at some of the other teams out west. It's like, I don't think the Clippers could really bring him in, but certainly they could use a guy like that. OKC, a team that would maybe use some center depth. But Yeah, man, I'm holding Okongwu in like every long-term league that I play in. I absolutely love him. I think that the time will come where that will pay off. They gave him an extension for a reason, so he's a pretty good place to start. I think the Hawks in general are a pretty good team to look at for later season value. I think Chicago would be another one. It's like if Zach LaVine gets dealt, the obvious name I guess would be Dosunmu, but like even when he's played big minutes this year, he's been pretty disappointing. He's just kind of like a worse version of Jaden Ivey to me. But if you're handing him 35 plus minutes a game, I think then he becomes valuable. So he'd be on the list for me. The Jazz, if they were to deal Jordan Clarkson, it's like I guess we'd see more Keontae George. We kind of saw that early in the season. We'll probably see more Agbaji. We'll see more THT. I'm not really fired up about those guys.
Yeah, it's tough to come up with a list on the fly of the stash candidates, but depending on how deep your league is, if Scoot Henderson is kind of on and off rosters, a guy like that, Malcolm Brogdon, I think is most likely going to get traded, and then you'll see Scoot get a ton of minutes after that.
Yeah.
Let's see what else.
I would throw, and this is deep leagues only. You got to see it's like Nick Smith, who's a first round pick, big time high school prospect. Somebody who kind of had like an up and down injured season at Arkansas. If the Hornets turn into fire sale team, Gordon Hayward, Miles Bridges, basically anybody but LaMelo and Brandon Miller, I think could be on the table for them. That's one of those guys that you could see maybe having a run at the end of the year. But I think he's probably a more effective real life player than fantasy. So you're digging a little bit deep there. There really aren't that many sellers. That's the thing, right? It's like I think in the West, we just talked about, there's 12 teams that want to make the playoffs right now. It's like Memphis, they don't really have anything to sell, and they're basically down to their young guys already. You talked about Portland. I think Brogdon's the obvious one. Scoot, I think, has his moment at some point later in the year. I don't think really the Spurs have much to sell. No. Washington's kind of stuck where they are. Detroit, I mean, they're already down to their young guys too.
Charlotte, Chicago, Atlanta, Portland. Those are probably your big sellers in the NBA. So if you just want to look at those rosters and see who would become available or who would step up in the absence of who gets dealt, you can look at that route. The problem that I have with getting too deep into the weeds with that sort of projection of who would step up in another player's absence, when it's not someone that's obvious, like Malcolm Brogdon leaves, they drafted Scoot early, obviously they're going to give him that role, is you don't know who's coming back. And so you could stash a guy that ends up getting usurped from the guy that they just traded for. You never know how these rotations are going to bear out. So while it is a savvy thing to do to look ahead, I think sometimes we can overthink it a little bit.
Yeah, the last two names I'll throw out before we go would be both Thompsons. I think Detroit is a team that has, for as weird as this roster is, they have a couple guys that Alec Burks, for example, Joe Harris, who's not really been playing for them, and then the most obvious one being Bogdanovich. If they were to part ways with him, that's 33 minutes a night that become available, and I think we do see a late season Ausar Thompson resurgence. And then Houston, to me, they're on the borderline. They could sell. I don't think they'll be a buyer. They could just stand pat, but you got Ahmed Thompson, you got Cam Whitmore. Both guys have looked pretty good when they've had the minutes.
Cam has looked great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think they really trade Dylan Brooks. One, I don't think there's a market for him. Two, he just signed a contract. You're not trading Jabari Smith. I don't think they're trading Jalen Green. That was out there early in the season, but he's played better lately. It'd be kind of crazy to punt on him, in my opinion. But do they thin out that depth at all? It's like Jay Sean Tate, somebody like that. Jeff Green, a veteran who's been playing a decent amount of minutes. Even just removing like one of those guys from the clutter, I think could help Amen Thompson. And even if they don't make a trade, I think we see more Amen down the stretch, especially if Houston falls back and they're just kind of hanging around the play-in zone. You forget what kind of pedigree Amen Thompson had, right? I think the injury early on clouded, kind of felt like he got off to the slow start. It was basically because he just didn't play in November and December. And there's, I think, sky high expectations for this guy. So both Thompsons are guys that I would keep an eye on as well. Brandon, good stuff as always, man. Always love doing this pod with you. Every single Wednesday, you can find us at 10:30 a.m. Eastern right here on this stream. Your Magic, they're on the road right now. They're at San Antonio tonight. They play at Minnesota on Friday. So I know you got a little bit of time off as far as being at the arena, but enjoy those games, man, and looking forward to doing this next Wednesday.
Yeah, my life